Welcome to episode 17 of Side Chat. In this episode, James and I continue to talk about motivation. In particular, we focus on self determining theory, SDT for short. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As usual, if you have any comments or suggestions, please send them to sidechat@omnisci.com or tweet to side_chat. Hi there, and welcome to Psych Chat. This is episode 17, and I am Austin Tay, your host. And of course, today I have my co host, James. James, how are you?
Dr. Austin, always a pleasure.
It's always nice to have you on this podcast together with me. Now, we were talking about motivation in our last episode, which of course it is not up yet. For those who are listening to this one, you will get to listen to it when it's up. We talked a little bit about motivation. Actually, we talked quite a bit about motivation. And there were so many things to talk about and to cover. We decided that today we are going to do a extension of the topic of motivation. Now, prior to this recording, both of us were talking a little bit more about motivation, the existing model where psychologists, practitioners, still very stuck with Maslow's needs, hierarchy of needs. And we know that on a kind of level, we understand it is essential to know the fundamental biological needs. But in practical terms, research has also found that the needs themselves, the way it is categorized, is not necessarily very linear. It doesn't go that way. And of course, in the context of work, we are questioning whether Maslow's needs is actually applicable. And of course, with that, other theories that come up with different theories to explain. Now, James, you are very passionate about motivation and then the theories itself. Now, you were talking to me a little bit more about why can't we have a model that is more suitable for the folks in our space, or even for work related roles. You mentioned a little bit about some of the studies that you read, Barrick and Mount came out with this thing called high level strivings. Now there's a connection with traits, high level strivings, and then related to the relevant job that will kind of support what they theorize. As in, there's a connection between the traits itself. What kind of traits will actually exhibit the motives or high level strivings, and then in identify that, we can come up with jobs that are more tailor made to the individuals rather than the box standard type of jobs. And as we know, the world is evolving. The work environment is evolving very fast. More and more jobs needs to be created, but we can't stick with the same old anymore. So I want to hear your perspective of all this, your insight to that, because I think it has to be shared. It has to be shared to all our listeners because it's really, really interesting what you were talking to me earlier. Please do so.
Thanks, Austin. Really kind. Yeah, we were talking about just the state of understanding of motivation. And I remember, some months back when we were just talking about it, there's a common idea that motivation research hasn't moved on, for decades. But the reality is it has. It's just not really been picked up. And it's hard to understand why. The obviously we have different opinions now because I think we're much more up to date. But yeah, if we go to an organization today and we ask somebody about motivation, an HR person or whatever, they're likely to be able to tell us something about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They might tell us something about Hertzberg's satisfaction hygiene theory.
Yes.
That's probably it.
Yes.
Or they'll say something about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation as a dichotomy. It's one or the other, and that whatever that is, just as a categorical exercise. And that's probably it. Motivations are typically then understood as that the paradigm is that, if you think about the triangle of people, you've got things you can see at the top and things you can't see at the bottom. And there's traits up there, which you can see because those are how we describe ourselves and other people through behaviors. And underneath traits is motives. We can't see them. They're not seen. And actually, that's how Murray would say motives are. They're unconscious, and therefore you can't express them directly. You can only access them through fantasy, through the TAP, thematic apperception test. Sort of psychodynamic projection into image descriptions.
Yes.
But it and then somewhere in that mix is values. Well, where do values go? They're deeper than motives? Are they the same as motives? No, they're not the same as motives. They're above motives. My God, if you go to an online tool to measure motivation, and I have done many, you will find, if you're just curious about what's a value and what's a motive, when is a value a need, or when is a need a value, it's all over the place.
Yes.
The motivation questionnaires typically seem to be a wish list, a mix of terms that could either be in someone's head a value, in another person's head a need. Now, of course, in some ways, if they're motivating, if they have an effect on a person putting in more effort and getting a beneficial performance or well-being outcome, then that is a motivator, however we label them. But fundamentally, we seem to be unclear about what is a need, what is a value, when is a need not a value, when is a value not a need. And it literally is just jumbled up. And what's the relationship between motivations and traits? Are they biologically different, psychologically different? Which comes first, the need or the trait? And so, I've been enjoying the last few months trying to unravel this. And also the issue that this sort of problematic paradigm is that that it's somehow all based on the individual rather than on the individual in society, in their context. Because motives are sometimes derived, the reason I do something is absolutely a factor of my culture, of my family, of what I need to do for my family now, what's critical for their survival or otherwise, or just to get, some sort of reward. So to ignore the system, the socio-cultural system that I'm existing in, plus my individual motivators and my personality would be, it's hardly unsurprising that we can't really predict anything out of it. It's too typhoid's out there. It's too complex. But what we've got at the moment seems to me still an understanding it's too simplistic, too out of date, not connected with our neurological insights now, and ignoring the big five trait understandings that we have that have evolved in the last 2-3 decades that haven't necessarily been integrated properly into our understanding of these higher order strivings. So to pick up on that, there's lots of things to pull apart, but I'll pick up firstly and just describe for the folks what the traits approach to motivation is, and maybe then we can talk about. Actually, maybe could we talk about first self-determination theory?
Sure. Let's do a Deci SDT then.
Fantastic. I mean, just briefly. So self-determination theory uh, easy to pick up and have a look at, is a collection of many things, but the fundamental part, it deals with the nature of what motivates. And it has this nice continuum from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. And previously, we would talk about these as a dichotomy. Something is an extrinsic motivator or an intrinsic motivator. Their approach, Deci and Ryan and all their other collaborators, would say, no, it's not that at all. We can understand that in more of a continuum. Is that just the more internalizing that need becomes, the more motivating it becomes. So the more internalized it is, the more that I feel that it's me, it's by my choice that I'm doing this, the more that I will derive actual enjoyment and interest out of it, the more intrinsically motivating it is. And the more intrinsically motivating it is, the more likely I will get well-being and performance benefits from it. So it has this continuum. So we're saying, your mother, your parents' desire for you to be very conscientious could be something that's anathema to your personality, to your traits, or your basic needs yourself. But you can so it begins an extrinsic need, an extrinsic drive that you need to satisfy without, otherwise there will be consequence. And the more you can internalize that, and there we get into a bit of that cognitive dissonance. What do I do?
Yes.
But if the result of the cognitive dissonance is to internalize it, then that's more likely to become intrinsically motivated, and it becomes part of you. It's no longer their desire, it's your desire. And that's fabulous. So it's to appreciate, and in that journey of internalization, or the degree of autonomy that we see in it, of our actions, we get, in the execution or pursuit of those things, we get meaning and purpose out of them. So in some ways, the pure intrinsic is just enjoyment and interest. It's not meaning and purpose necessarily, but meaning and purpose is derived on that journey as we're internalizing it. So it's a really nice way to think about extrinsic and intrinsic in a more refined way, and in a more way of the mind trying to work stuff out. But the power of motivation is when we own it, when we feel that it does, and ultimately when we're doing it through enjoyment or interest or meaning and purpose to us.
I like the fact that you just said that. It's like, because our understanding of motivation is so clearly defined as in either intrinsic or extrinsic. What you are saying is, yes, although it could be extrinsic motivation, if we are able to internalize that, it becomes something that we really yearn and we really want to do. We're not just doing because there is a reward waiting for us, but we're doing it because we really want to do that. And it's something that is in us that propels us to do so. And I think that will also kind of look at the intrinsic motivation. It's not a very selfish thing anymore. Someone might be doing, from what we know, someone is doing because they want to do something to keep them happy, to satisfy their own internal motivation or needs or wants. But sometimes, if from what you're saying, what Ryan Deci is saying, if it comes from a continuum, we could actually internalize extrinsic motivators to become something that we really yearn to do. I can see how that is going to translate into someone being selfless, someone being able to do something bigger than themselves. So it's not just about me and
for society.
Yes, for society.
For their family, their parents. You can see how those cultural drivers, needs, actually become connected to me and my motives. And it's not me my own things. I can internalize society's needs.
And it's no longer private.
And they become mine.
Yes. It's no longer a private thing, I think.
It starts to connect to me with the external world and the external social cultural systems that we exist in. And that's fantastic.
Yes. And I think also it kind of broaden the concept of identity.
Lovely.
Right? Self-identity, because your identity is not just who you are, what you're made up of. You're greater than that. You're more than that. Your identity now is expanded because whether we like it or not, we are all part of a system, and we are part of a greater society. Uh,
Mm.
Researchers in the past or theorists in the past always view human being as a very individual, selfish. But I think at this time and age, we no longer can actually perceive ourselves as a very selfish individual person. We have to be more. I hate to use the word collective, but I think we need to be a little more collective as in Asia, right? Where we are always known as being more collectivist. But I think generally everybody needs to think about the next person next to them, the person that maybe two houses down the road, how my actions are going to impact them too. And I think this is what, uh, when we talk about motivation, it should go in that direction. And in the context of work, I can see a lot of benefits, because if someone is very dedicated because of intrinsic motivation, they are coming to work a little bit more gear up, a bit more motivated, and they know what they are doing is not only just satisfying the processes within the work, but it's going to create a great impact to the society at large. And I think, wouldn't it be a great feeling to wake up, today I'm doing my work, but I know the work that I'm doing is going to have a great impact to the society. I think that's a fantastic way to look at motivation.
Yeah, it connects it with our whole us, with our social cultural environment, and those elements can become purpose and meaning for us beyond our self enjoyment. This sort of satisfy, feed me more chocolate. Ridiculous. Now we're more complex than that,
Yeah.
and ultimately our motives, the things that drive our behaviors, are clearly more complex than just I want this, I want that. No. Or it's for my growth. No. It's too limited. So it is a lovely. It does lead to many questions.
Yeah.
Allows us to start to embrace more things when we stop seeing it as dichotomies.
Yeah.
It's more refined than that, and it, as you quite rightly point out, it connects us with the external world, which is really great. The other part of the theory, there are several parts of it, but obviously the key bits, I think, is what they define as being primary needs. And they come across criteria to say, well, what's a real core need for a human, rather than just, again, wish lists of stuff, which we've got lots of. They can define. They've got out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 characteristics that try to say, well, what is a primary need? And again, they'll talk about a biological basis, universality. One of the fundamental things about it, though, is that the satisfaction of it, which is, it's insatiable because it's a need.
Yep.
It's not a deficit. They're not deficit needs like physiological things. You must have it.
Yep.
And if you don't, if you're thirsty, you've got to drink water. Then you're okay. This is where more like the growth needs from Adolph or for Maslow's higher needs, which aren't satisfied. You can just keep feeding them. They would say that they come down to, that a need isn't. If this thing is a need, if it's satisfied, then the organism gets benefit.
Yep. And
that's fundamentally in its well-being or for its survival. And for us, that's performance.
Yep.
I do more work.
Yep.
I survive. I'm more value to community, whatever, and my well-being, mental and physical. And through those things, they come up with 3 needs, and they obviously echo lots of previous research. But they are, for them, ARC, autonomous, relatedness, and competence. And the definition of those are tricky because, again, as we know, a title is a title. The definition is the critical thing.
Yep.
Autonomy for them, of course, there's always this idea for humans of, the balance of individual against group. Autonomy, though, for them is a little bit mixed up with this idea of internalizing the motive from extrinsic to intrinsic. But the autonomy to them is about volition. Is that it's me making the decision. I'm able to be responsible and to make my decisions. So it's not about being independent. It's about being responsible and able to make choices. So I can be in a collective, in a group, and that's wonderful. But the way I make choices for my behaviors are my choices. I just make them in the line of what I want to do. Yeah.
Mm.
So autonomy is for them is that ability to make decisions on my own way, and you can see how we can easily link that to the world of work.
Yep.
You make people. Going back to job design, task clarity.
Yep.
Responsibility, feedback, fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, recognition that this is you and you're responsible, and listening to people, asking for opinions, giving them a chance to job craft. That's all feeding this need for autonomy.
Yep.
And autonomy is just saying that I am an adequate human being. I am growing.
Yep.
So the autonomy part is very linked to, I think, to the growth part. Is that I can grow as an independent flower. I can grow. This is great. I'm functioning as an adult here. The relatedness one is obviously linked with many motivational stuff. We'll identify the absolute need for humans to relate to others, to be part of a group. Yep. And that's obviously a complex thing, but hugely there's no debate about that as a need of being fundamental, that humans need that. Need to feed that. And again, in the workplace, easy to drive those needs, but so critical now we think about it in these disconnected times. Yep. How do we feed everyone's relatedness need? How do we do that? And the final one, and competence is this idea about the human need to be mastering our environment. We must see ourselves as being capable of surviving and of demonstrating our value to our group, which also guarantees our survival. There's this innate, that what underpins all these three for them is the belief that humans are innately driven to grow. And this is something that comes out from Murray and from Maslow as well. And all the humanistic sort of psychology is that they see the human condition as being one of capability and growth. That we are a curious species, that we want to learn and grow. That's how we become healthy. We're not healthy if we're put in the dark and chained to a lamppost. It's just not how we as humans are. And that these three needs recognize that. And I think that's very positive. And so equally so easy as a quick checklist to link it, given that these are fundamental needs and universal across the world. Yep. Because people will exhibit them in different ways, but everybody needs these. One way or another, they need them. So you won't go wrong if you create jobs like this, plus the other stuff. And I think that's a positive thing. And we should be talking about this rather than Maslow.
Yes. But of course, the question here would be the fear that organizations have when they are giving individuals too much autonomy. And and I think organization is kind of a very weird creature, isn't it? They like to have people working, but they don't like people to over socialize. So then, of course, it impinge on the second part you were talking about, relatedness, because you and I know as psychologists, human beings thrive to be around people. We thrive in the sense of we will be able to bounce ideas. Creativity will come out from discussion, and even from arguments or discourse, we are able to come up with new things to grow. And for organization to restrict us or restrict employees with rigid job description and very arbitrary performance matrix is just stamping down their ability to grow. And I see a lot of organizations talking about, how can then we have this growth mindset and make people think differently? Start from the fundamentals. Start from the way you actually create the jobs. If your job itself is restrictive, you cannot expect the employees to be able to come to work one day, oh, I have a growth mindset because I've just learned how to think differently. You can't, because if the job itself is not giving them the autonomy or the capacity to deviate, but then still doing the job in alignment with the organization vision or strategy, then no matter how many trainings you're going to give them, they will not be able to do so because they are curtailed from daily.
Yeah.
And I think organization, hoping some of them will be listening to our podcast and realize that this maybe is something they need to look at. How do we create such an environment to implement something like this? And we were talking about job crafting previously. The more I dwell on the word of job crafting, it seems that it is not as difficult as most people think. I think it's also the component of, or rather the factor there would be people who are managing others. Are they willing to let people have autonomy, full control of their job? We hear a lot of managers saying, I want to delegate, I want to empower people. But it's a word. It's a word that the actions doesn't really coincide. I want to empower, but they have to be empowered within a restricted framework. And that's not empowerment at all. And I think that is very dangerous. But listening what you have just said about autonomy, relatedness, and competence, this is, you're right, a universal thing. Everybody wants to do that. But if we are not able to be given that space and environment to do it, organization is going to be expecting to get employees who are going to be like zombies, doing what they are told, but they will never be able to help the organization grow or produce new ideas for them. And I think this is something organization needs to really think about it and stop basing on motivation just with a very two differentiation here, just intrinsic and extrinsic itself. It's more than that. They need to start thinking a little bit more about motivation, and hopefully we have conveyed this message to them, and with even
Absolutely.
excitement about talking about it. But of course,
Absolutely.
go on, please tell us a little bit more. You want to tell us about a trait.
Sure. Yeah. I think obviously I echo what you say. The self-determination theory is simple enough and fundamental enough to apply, and very straightforward to apply appropriately in the workplace. And obviously leaders have to decide what sort of business and people they've got. The key thing to remember about this is that it's not some sort of righteous crusade is motivation. Motivation from a business point of view is just getting the most out of your human resource. People have come to work with capabilities that they will not use unless they're motivated. What you're trying to do as a leader is to get them to give their maximum effort to you, to engage those capabilities in a way that they can operate at a high level over a long period of time. Yes. That's what motivation gives you. They've got an engine. Motivation is the fuel. Motivation is the overdrive that gives you more. It's discretionary effort you're trying to get from people. And humans have so much of it. So that, again, it's not like we come in and we just operate in one gear. That may then be what our default setting is. Well, we're going with gear one. But if I'm motivated, if I see purpose, if I feel enjoyment or interest in this, if these basic needs are satisfied sufficiently, I've got second, third, fourth, and fifth gears to give you in engaging my talents.
Yeah.
Motivation is not some sort of liberal game to make the world a nice place from a business point of view. This is hardcore resource exploitation because of how humans are. And leadership is just that. It's getting people to go in the direction that you want to go, but to go willingly and with effort.
Yeah.
That's leadership. Which is just engaging people's with motivating people to do it. So it's just so important that we understand this. We understand how people work, and that we can come up with, for managers and leaders, with effective ways to do that. And of course, for individuals to understand, if they're crafting their own life, how to get more out of it by giving themselves the things that they actually need. So here's a great thing. Obviously, there's lots to it. The great thing with social self-determination theory is it has been extremely well researched now, and the impacts have been demonstrated in meta-analyses in multiple areas, from education to sport to work, and the health. And I think that's why it's really is now setting itself up as the de facto model of motivation for this part of the 21st century. And that's a good thing, because it's helping us define things. It's helping us clarify things. So on the back of that, I can link to the question about traits. So the question I asked you earlier was a bit teasing. Which comes first, the motive or the trait?
Yes.
So in that paradigm, which we talked about earlier, the traditional paradigm, the motives are deeper psychological constructs than the traits. But we've those in the area, of course, will have heard of the big five traits, who emerged in the 1990s, and of course are very, very well established now as the default way to describe personality traits. Big five: extroversion through to conscientiousness. The drivers of that model, primary drivers, were folks called Barrack and Mount, and they're extremely well published and well known. Well, they've not dropped their championing of trait, and they're saying, through a theory that they've come up with called the theory of purposeful work behavior. A little reference: Barrack, Mount, and Lee, 2013, where they set this out. And fundamentally, and I'm not talking from notes here, so I'm talking from sort of my memory. They come at it this way. They say that traits are fundamental biologically to humans. It's we are predisposed to try to exhibit certain levels of extroversion, agreeableness, openness, neuroticism, and conscientiousness. We're predisposed to exhibit those sorts of behaviors, to express them in the world. And the way that we do that is, of course, in interacting with situations. So situations will moderate the opportunities for us to engage in our version, our level of extroversion, to engage in our level of conscientiousness. So already it says, well, that's that trait activation idea. If I want to be extroverted, for a simple example, then I'm happy if I'm extroverted, because I'm doing what I like to do, which my brain's telling me, you should be doing extroverted things. So if you give me the conditions to show my extroverted behaviors, I'm happy. Well, that sounds like a need to me already, because if I'm satisfying myself, I'm comfortable and happy and enjoying it, that's a need, isn't it? What they say is that our drive, so we've fundamentally set up in our brain to express our traits, and of course we've learned some of those needs as well. Those traits are shaped a little bit too. They then say that the need to express it, the desire to express it, creates a higher order striving, a higher mental goal for us. And they flip in and pull in goal theory to this as well, because of course that's very relevant, the learnings from that. And they just say this: look, so the extroverted people with some agreeableness in there too, they're going to have much more of they're going to shape a goal in the relatedness area.
Yep.
Absolutely. But it's not the relatedness goal, the relatedness motive doesn't come first. It comes because of my trait setup. That goal becomes critical to me. And the same with conscientiousness and perhaps emotional stability. It's driving the nature of my goal in the competency area, the need to do things and to look good, to feel good by completing my tasks. So this is how they relate it. So they say they can link traits into self-determination theory, linking each trait or combinations with the goals, with self-determination theories, needs, and they just call those higher order strivings, higher order goals.
Right.
And then they'll link those directly to work design, because you give that work design allows people to pursue the satisfaction of these needs. And for them, the ideas of meaningfulness and purposefulness are absolutely wrapped up in the pursuit of those goals and in the execution of them, the doing of those behaviors. So they start to pull it all together in them. This is how it is. And of course, then that interacts with the environment. Like I said, the environment of work or social, to give us the opportunities to express or have those things suppressed. They add to it in their model. They say, well, if we look at social cultural theorists and the interactionists like Hogan and so on, who look at the desire of the whole human organism to either get along with people or to get ahead of people, that needs for status and achievement over other people, competition. They add another area, which is around the need for achievement and power. So they have 4 elements in their model, actually, but the core of it is still self-determination theory. So it's a really productive, I think, development, which again is still relatively recent and is not even taught yet, as far as I can see, in many areas. But I think it's fundamental that the desire to link social psychological constructs that we are much more aware of now in the last 20 years, the last 30 years, and that we're not looking all the way back and stuck with the wonderful work done by Murray and Maslow's and Hertzberg and so on, but we're looking at pulling these things together, clarifying our definitions, and linking these our understandings of traits and needs and values and putting them together. Say, this is how it is. We need a parsimonious model of higher order drivings, like we've got parsimony in describing behaviors. And that is something that we should come up with now in this 21st century. And I absolutely support that idea. Enough of making it up and ignoring what's gone before, making up new definitions. No, we've got to build on it. And I think that's what these guys are doing in the theory of purposeful work behavior, and what self-determination theorists are doing as well, because it's open. They're saying, add research, guys. Let's build on this to make something more and more cohesive. And I think that's extremely productive.
Yep, I think it's interesting. You are saying people don't talk about this or they don't teach. Well, I'm actually doing a teaching course on motivation and emotion. And
you're the man.
This was a few things.
You're the man for the time.
I actually talk about also that I kind of recommend, or rather introduce the ideas to the students to let them realize that there's more than just one theory. How we use them is really depending on the context here. And then of course there are a lot of theories that are out, and about the people who were using it before. You have the theory X and Y. Now we were talking about this theory earlier on, which I found called the progress principle. Now this was a book written by Emma Bill and Kramer, and they came out with 6 things that for people to experience what and then recognize what meaningful progress. They said you need to set clear goals and objectives, allow autonomy, provide resources, allow ample time, provide support and expertise, learn from failure. So from the 6 points there, we were talking about it. They're so similar to some of the theories that we already know. And I think newer theories are understanding that they cannot come up with a theory or an idea on its own, but they have to borrow different theories to come up with a new suggestion, which I think is a good thing, because researchers are able to identify what are the best things that we could combine. As you said, why can't we have a model that has all this parsimonious bit in it, and people could use it properly and not to depend on an old model which is not relevant or is very unclear in any case, right? When we
It's
talk about
been researched fully and is not sufficient to
yes,
be a model that we use as
yes,
truth, which is Maslow's classic. It
yes,
just, the research never stood up,
no,
but people never let it go.
no, no. I think because the impact is so great, wasn't it? I mean, it's kind of
Yeah, it
I
was fantastic.
it's what we would say is a kind of Barnum effect. Oh yeah, it applies to me, so everything makes sense. But beyond that, I think practitioners like ourselves and also
Yeah,
researchers, we understand it has moved from the pyramid to everything else already. So
yeah.
maybe organization is still not there yet. They're catching up, and we're not catching up. I think podcasts like this is great because people can understand there's beyond Maslow. Maybe we should title this as Beyond Maslow.
Up to you, my friend.
Because we are talking about different theories, and we like to be able to inform our listeners what we
Mm.
understand, and that and then one of the things that we were talking earlier on, which is very interesting to maybe echo here, is that the areas of organizational psychology or occupational psychology is not a very static industry or static practice. We are always evolving. We are always looking at different things. And
Yeah.
psychologists in general, we are good at doing that anyway. We critique every research we can think of, and then we think of what else can we do differently. And I think this is very important for HR practitioners or organizations who are really interested in wanting to provide maybe a better working environment for their employees or the well-being of their employees, or maybe employing people who are motivated or going to be staying with their organization. uh, Not only they need to listen to our podcast, but also be kind of be abreast in research in these areas, because that is going to be only beneficial to them, uh, understanding what are the current theories. It will benefit them in terms of how they do selection, how they train, and how they develop people within the organization. So I think that is very important for organization to hear. And of course, James, you have so many facets that you want to talk about motivation itself. And I think we might have to actually do another episode just to do so, to discuss a little bit more. Well, I don't know whether the listeners are thinking that we are doing this overboard by stretching the two episodes. But I think if there are more things that we could talk about, I'm happy to have another discussion with
Mm.
that. But of course, you as the listeners, please let us know if you have any suggestions or you want to comment on what we were just talking about. Do send us a email to sitechat@omnisci.com or tweet to us at site_chat. We will be very happy to answer any question. Now, as usual, James, this has been fantastic, and for people who don't know that we are using a video to do this, so I could see your expression as you're talking. And we might consider putting this online somewhere so people could see us, our animated expression while we are talking about topics that really we are passionate about. But I think in the meantime, they're probably just going to just listen to us first until we're comfortable to perhaps show our face. I'm not sure. Something in the pipeline. But as always, thank you very much for
My
the time
pleasure.
and sharing with us your passion in motivation. And do stay tuned for our next episode. What topics are we going to talk about? I don't know, but definitely if you want to know, uh, subscribe to our podcast and stay tuned for the next episode.